Welcome to Lesson 8 of Hobbyist Beekeeping. In this lesson we're going to talk about what to look for in your hive. The main points and things to be looking for during the year are workers bringing in pollen, bees flying to and from, pulling out foundation, egg laying, enough feed, the bees being mild-mannered and less disturbed, the pattern of brood laying and stores, whether or not there are queen cells, the clustering on the outside of a hive, enough space, robbing, and diseases. And in this lesson, we will not be talking too much about the subject of robbing or diseases. That's for another lesson. Workers bringing in pollen is one of your first signs in the spring that life is good in the hive. Bees will start bringing in pollen as soon as there's something out there to have pollen and when the weather is warm enough for them to be flying. Because pollen is used in brood rearing, having the bees come in loaded down with pollen like these are is a good sign that they're getting ready to really work on their brood. Once again, flying, you want them to be busy, you want them out collecting nectar, bringing in pollen, so you want them out and acting like busy bees. When you look in the hive too, you want to make sure, especially in a new hive, are they pulling out their foundation? The picture in the upper right shows a black colored foundation, which was put into the hive. It helps to show the wax that the bees are bringing in, which is the light color, and they're just starting to develop the foundation and make space for either brood rearing or feed and storage. On the bottom left, you see that frame pulled out a little bit further, and you can see that they, even before the cell is completely formed, they're starting to use it for the storage of pollen and a little bit for brood. Here's a pattern of brood that you're looking for. The center area is capped over. It is capped brood. On the ring around the outside, there's some pollen stores, and up in the very corner, there's a little bit of honey stores. So this shows a very active brood laying and a good pattern of brood laying. You're also looking to make sure that there's enough feed being brought in for the brood and for the hive. Once again, in the center of this frame, there's brood, and then around the outside, they're bringing in the pollen and the nectar, which is not capped over yet because it hasn't been fully ripened. And you'll notice that they're actually working on pulling out more foundation on the very bottom rim. They haven't totally gotten that done yet. You're looking for the personality of the bees too. When they're aggressive at the beginning of the year in the spring when they're busy working, usually that means there's something wrong. At this point, they should be mild-mannered. Yeah, they aren't going to like having their frames pulled out, but they're not bothering you too much because they are very, very busy doing what they're doing right now. And as long as you don't disturb them and handle them gently and calmly and smoothly, they are not going to be very upset. If they are, then usually something else is not right with the hive. Maybe the queen isn't fully functional, or they don't have enough feed. You're also checking as the season goes along for queen cells, and in this picture you'll notice that there are two down at the bottom, and you can see that they do look very different from the other standard cells. Once again, in the middle of this frame there is brood that has been sealed over for the most part, ringed with some pollen, ringed with some nectar, and then up in the corners actually the nectar has been capped, meaning that it's honey and it's fully ripened. This hive has gone ahead and made 2 queen cells. They are swarm cells, meaning that this hive is strong. They think they're strong enough and they're getting ready, if they decide to swarm, and this would be the cell that they would then lay an egg in that would raise the new queen for this hive. Another sign that the hive is really strong and maybe thinking about swarming is heavy clustering on the outside of the hive. You want to ensure also that there's enough space in the hive. If this was your single hive body and it had this many bees sort of overflowing out the top when you opened it, that would be a sign that it's definitely time to add another hive body to this hive. If it is that you already have a second hive body on and you see this many bees, you want to be adding supers. Diseases and pests are a topic in and of themselves, and we will not be going into any in-depth discussion of all the issues involved with diseases and pests of honeybees in this particular class. Since we've referred a little bit to a couple of these, let me just run through them very briefly. Nosema is a condition that is like a dysentery. Honeybees do not void during the winter when they can't fly out of their hive. They will only void outside. If their system gets compacted enough because the weather has not allowed them to make that cleansing flight, it is possible that they'll develop this dysentery and actually need to void in the hive or right on the outside of the hive. Depending upon how bad this is, it can cause a severe reduction in the hive and potentially even the death of the hive. We've talked about varroa mites a little bit throughout several of these lessons, and a picture of a varroa mite, they are visible with the naked eye. They're little, they're red, and their legs are all on one side. Once you see one, you will always remember what they look like. They can cause a problem. Some of the techniques that we've talked about in these lessons give you ways to mitigate or minimize the impact that they could have on your hive. There's a huge number of other potential pests and predators. One of the most common ones in our area is mice who love to move into the hive in the fall and take over the hive using the stores that have been produced, and there's quite a surprise when the beekeeper opens that hive in the spring to see how things are doing. Another one that we hear a lot about, especially after a couple of summers that we've had recently, is the wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets. And all three of those can predate on a honeybee hive that isn't strong enough to take care of itself. Putting up traps to catch the wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets is certainly an option for you, but the most important thing to remember if you're doing this is put them up early in March. These wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets, the only member of their colonies that lives over winter is the queen. She starts flying earlier than honeybees, and if you can catch a queen, then obviously you don't have her nest to deal with during the year. If you use these kind of traps, put them nearby your hive, but not right at your hive location. You want to encourage the wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets to come to your trap, but not to go directly to your hives. So that is all that we'll be covering with diseases and pests in this particular lesson, and in fact in this particular class. In summary, we've talked about what you should be looking for in your hive. And definitely you should be looking for bees bringing in pollen, which is a great sign that they're interested in brood rearing. You want to have your bees out and flying, coming in not only with pollen but also with nectar. When you open your hive, you want to see that they are beginning to pull out foundation and that they've started laying brood. You want to be sure that there's enough feed, that you are providing supplemental feed if it's the spring of the year or in the fall of the year, but also that they're bringing in their own nectar, and you can tell whether they are bringing in nectar and have matured it enough so that they have sealed it and capped it. You want to make sure that they're mild-mannered, that they're not aggressive. If in the spring of the year, in the summer, they are acting irritable, usually that's a sign something isn't going well with the hive. You want to look for queen cells, which, depending upon the type of queen cell, it either indicates it's a strong and healthy hive thinking about potentially splitting or swarming, or the queen is not healthy, not doing the job that the workers think she should be doing, and they're getting ready to replace her. You're checking also to make sure that your bees have enough room in their hive. And if you need to add additional hive bodies or supers, now is the time to do that before they get too crowded. And then you're looking for anything that doesn't look right. You're looking for, are your bees acting okay, or might they have a disease? Or are pests causing them problems, and have they moved into the hive?